about, I mean, it was sort of, in practice, more implied during NEP, and it was more discretionary in terms of the evaluation of projects. I mean, what we're doing now is really trying to formalize it a bit more with some quantitative benchmarks. You know, in terms of demand risk, I mean, probably increases it a bit for the developer, right, having this requirement. But that also increases the importance of proper site selection. You know, your demand growth for residential customers is probably going to ramp up over time, but so this effectively is asking developers to find sites where there are existing productive loads that can assume quite a bit of the energy very quickly, right? And that's sort of a recipe, I guess, in a way, for a sustainable site. And as Chinua mentioned as well, I mean, if we already know that these are the types of sites we should be targeting, why not focus on them, right? So that's sort of the intent. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So gentleman over there, and then the middle, and then we go to the back. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kanayo Amagwai. I work with Orca Solar. So my question basically is around three things: collaboration, impact, and of course commercial viability of some of these things. And I would try and, make it as simple as possible. So you have situations where, and again, I've seen some of these technologies, the mini grid, the mesh grid, solar home systems. I've seen how they interact across commercial metrics, and also in terms how they interact in terms of impact, what they can do and what they can do. So my question is around possible collaborations in the event where someone deploys like a mini grid technology, and then there are outliers in the community where it may not be commercially viable for them to extend distribution networks. Is it possible that the mesh grid or any other kind of technology, I see that you mentioned the SHS, but is it possible that the mesh grid can be used as an extension to, map out those areas where it is not possible, maybe commercially viable to extend, because you look at your cost of deployment, and then it doesn't just make sense for you to do at that point for that. And then secondly, also, if you're talking about concerns that I think Daniel shared earlier, where you have someone they've deployed and maybe they're not interested in extending their technology, extending other technology to cover these outliers, is there a framework, or is there a possible framework that would allow for collaboration between other developers that are trying to maybe like apply a particular technology in a community where there's already an existing technology, but there are outliers that are not, connected yet? So what would an ideal framework look like for that kind of scenario, basically? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your question is directed to who? Ari. Okay.
I think the answer is yes, to be honest. I think Hadiza in her presentation had focused on a combination of mini grid and SHS, but maybe because you're in the mesh grid and she didn't mention mesh grid as well. But yes, the answer is yes, there'll be that combination, but you can only claim per connection. So you won't be able to make double claims for that particular connection. So I think that resolves it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So we just come to the middle, and then we go to the back. So middle one here, middle one there, and then we'll go to the back. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Hakim Shadaya from Eaif Solar. We're just looking to go into mini grids now. And my question is around quality control and the technicalities behind how you grade a mini grid on sustainability planning. So batteries have different lifespans. Manufacturers have different technical specs. And let's say I put a grade A system and you're paying the same grant for someone that puts a low grade system. And under your sustainability planning, yes, of course, the low grade is more profitable because we've earned the same grant for a connection that is for less quality product. So most Nigerians will ask, how cheap is it, right? So we're always on cost control. But cost control and sustainable planning, they never sort of go together eventually in the long run. So I just want to ask to the team, how can we have, because in the world there's only so many manufacturers, right? So there has to be a way we can grade both quality and as well as go for the quantity that we want to increase connections in.
Thank you so much for that question. HPW. Okay.
No, I think, Hakim, I think you raised a very strong point. And I think the conversation we're having around integrating long-term finance should naturally address that risk, right? Because if you're taking a long-term risk on an asset, then you want to understand the lifespan and the economic cycle of that asset. So that goes naturally into your due diligence. So we have a system where we actually conduct an assessment on the quality of the OEM. We actually have engineers, electrical engineers as part of our team. So we're not just only providing finance. So therefore, there are essentially four verticals through which we conduct our due diligence assessment. There's a credit and finance, there's ESG, there's legal, and then there is a technical. And under the technical vertical, those questions are asked and answered. And if they're not satisfactorily answered, it's actually a deal breaker because there's an incentive. And that's the risk, when you have someone who's financing just against the grant. They're not particularly interested in the life cycle because, at the end of the day, they exit at the point the project is completed. But I also feel, I think Ari will provide some more context because I know that they sign off on the design and the developers and the OEMs. So by the time we actually look at these transactions, if you're even trying to change the OEM, you still have to go back to a process with REA to make those adjustments made. We've had that situation on deals where we've looked at, we've had conversations around the process that was gone through, and it appears to be a very thorough process with REA, but I'll allow Femi to add more context.
Yes, thank you very much, Hakim. It's a very good point. And I think it's something that the REA constantly has to evolve, even as the market evolves. There's a lot of technology that is out there right now, and I think we need to continue to review, even on probably a yearly, 3-month, 6-month basis, to ensure that our standards are par. But one thing I want us to also look into is the fact that I had a session the other day, and it was a thing of global standards. Defining what these global standards are in connection with what our unique circumstances are here. So you don't want to go with a product that, yes, so there are two types, a product that's going to give you that sustainability, long time lifespan, but what's the cost? Right, so you need to merge, or there needs to be a convergence between good standards and specifications and the cost, because what's the disposable income of our people here compared to other nations? So I think we also need to find that sweet spot almost, and that's the work we need to do on this end to ensure that we find the right balance there. Thank you.
Hakim, thanks for that question. I think from the program's perspective, what we're trying to do is ensure quality but not be overly prescriptive, right? And the way of doing that is to have these minimum technical specifications which are compliant with international norms, but then to allow developers to design systems and to consider the trade-off, right, between the number of years a system might last and cost, as long as you're above that minimum threshold. Right, and then that's a decision for developers and financiers, I would say, to decide which is a better fit, right, which mix of products.
It just shows to say how much I think this issue sort of has been discussed internally, but also something that there's no good answer, right? The sustainable way of doing this is, the financiers over the long time sort of insist on this. Right, and that's where I think Shinua was also coming in from. Once you make that as a recurring habit, the developers themselves would start using these quality components. Any sort of extrajudicial body that comes in and inspects, we're trying to do that REA interventionist, World Bank, teams checking it. It can work, but things will slip. And that's not a sustainable way for when you're not talking about 100 mini-grids, but when you're talking about 10,000 mini-grids. That's not so the only sustainable way is for commercial financiers, institutional financiers to sort of insist upon that, developers embark on it, and the more they do it, it becomes a part of their regular habit, and then then it becomes sort of a self-regulation rather than somebody imposing it.
Thank you very much, Ash. So in the interest of time, we'll just take like 3 more questions, and then considering the fact we can't answer all the questions today, so this is an ongoing conversation. We'll just keep talking about this until we get it right. So let's take from the gentleman in the middle and then we'll go to the back.
Hi, my name is Brad Matson. I'm the co-founder and chairman of Husk Power Systems. And we're known as a mini-grid developer, but we're actually a RESCO. And I want to talk about the idea of financing developers versus RESCOs. Because basically, we've never taken project finance in the history of the company. And we're at the currently development rate of installing 25 mini-grids per month. That's what we've achieved today. And we do it without project financing. You look at the project finance timeline you showed was like roughly 2 years, but there's a lot of data that says it's between 18 months and even 3 years. Our project development life cycle is 3 months to 6 months. And we talk about deploying 1,000 mini-grids. If we want to do it at scale, this timeline of being able to develop a project is just too long. So my question to the investor on the panel, and maybe the people also, on the rest of the people on the panel, would you support a transition in this industry from looking at, instead of project financing, investing in the companies? We only take corporate equity and corporate debt, and that's what allows us to go as fast as we're going. So I just want to bring that out as maybe when we talk about RESCOs versus developers, we have to think about a whole different financing mechanism.
Thank you very much. So that question is for...
The extended World Bank group is working with you on this. So that's my answer.
I think there are different sources of capital, right? There's a spectrum of different sources of funding that is available for a market. And a market composed of different type of players. And so when we think about the inclusion and how do we achieve inclusive growth, then we're looking at how to serve the different players. If you dimension the players today in terms of the numbers, you find that a lot of the, you have quite a number of developer type players that are local that we need to also ensure that they can mature. If they mature, the industry matures, right? And so project finance, in principle, whatever as defined, is actually, and as construed in the conversation or the presentation I had, is how do you architect capital to build capacity, right? Because the way the capital will play and working alongside a drift facility is to actually build capacity, because as a RESCO, you may not need as much liquidity because you have a balance sheet, but you need more players. We need more RESCOs. We need 100 RESCOs to achieve the scale of which we want to, but the industry is going through a maturity cycle, and we need to accelerate that maturity cycle, and that's why we're innovating around the tools that can enable us to accelerate that maturity cycle, such that we have 10 horsepowers in Nigeria, and that's success, right?
Thank you very much. So just to create balance, I think I'll just forcefully pass the mic to a female, really. Here, in front here.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Damilola Ashale, Vice President of RIAN, and also co-founder and Chief Operating Officer of Ashdam Solar. So my question is kind of very simple, but I believe a lot of us have this in our mind, and it is, InfraCredit spoke about that 180 days from appraisal to closure, and we also spoke about the ring fencing, which shows that we actually have a very, very tight schedule or deadline, sort of. And I'm wondering, when can we have access to this template for all the amendments and things that we need to start doing right now, so that we can start closing the deals as soon as that window opens for us to start submitting our projects and also transitioning from the NEP to theirs. Thank you.
Beautiful question. Now you see why I said the female should ask some questions. See, Ash, HPMU.
I mean, there's two things that you mentioned, right? One is on sort of changes that you can get prepared for. I mean, on the environmental and social, 96-97% of the changes is identical to the last one. We've had a round of trainings for the REA staff on the new environmental and social framework, and then we will roll out these trainings for all the developers. but it's not something that you'll find drastically different from the past. The other one is the changes on the ring fencing side. Again, I think there's nothing different that we're expecting. It's basically to say if you come with committed financing at the sign of grant agreement, you'll get this ring fencing done. But it comes with a trade-off, right? So it's a shared responsibility. Now that you have locked in ring-fenced funds, there is an expectation that within 12 months there will be progress that will be outlined in the implementation manual. Let me just stop there. I mean, it's not something that is not outlined in the grant agreement anyways. So there's not an additional requirement on top of what was anyways expected within the grant agreement.
So just one line to say that I don't think there's a start or stop. Keep the deals going, keep the projects going. The dares is here already. There's no historic day that the money starts to flow. Let the deals keep getting done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, HPMU. So we'll just take 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Well, you know, they say it's turn by turn. Finally, it's my turn. Thank you so much. My question is directed to InfaCredit, Azubike, and head PMU. In the microeconomic landscape today, 2 days ago, we have interest rate getting up to 26%. So how does that affect what you're going to put on the table? Because whatever you put on the table gets back to the numbers. And when it gets back to the numbers, it gets back to the tariff. So that's what I want you to help us with. Then for head PMU, you spoke about solar home system, but it wasn't clear what the capacities for this solar home system is or will be. And you also spoke about a pilot program in Lagos State for solar rooftop program. Can you give us a little bit of clarity into what the thinking is in these 2 directions? That can help us also position and know the numbers. Then, another concern for me that I always like to bring out to the forum is that renewable energy service companies are not at the same time always equipped to be productive use service providers. And here is this program being tied with productive use of energy, which presupposes that the renewable energy service company evacuating, you can only evacuate it within a certain period. What now happens within the other 8 months period? So in designing this program, I think we should have this conversation more, in depth to see how the PUE equipment now will come in. And again, for the market, I think some of us have to start thinking that the era of big capacity systems are going. The smaller the deployment, the more effective it will be, and the more result-oriented it could be. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. So we'll just take 1 more question so we can answer all at once, and then we'll just finish from here, because the REA has another business to attend to. So who is asking the question?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Felix. I'm the CEO of SolarWorks. We manufacture solar home systems and mesh grid controllers similar to Okras. I guess my main question goes to the right direction. When will you release a general framework document that really clarifies the different tiers, capacity ranges, not only for SHS, as the gentleman mentioned before, but also for mesh grids in particular, potentially different tiers for larger AC SHS, as well as, of course, mini grid connections? Because I think it's of absolute importance, because we're currently in discussion with a lot of investors and there's no clarity. We cannot really tell them this is going to be the disbursement rate, that's going to be the timeline. And we absolutely need this to actually get the pre-finance secured, which is vital to make this all happen. Because I think the DARIS program is absolutely amazing for obviously making this all financeable. But we struggle basically to close investments of debt finance as a pre-finance for the projects.
Thank you very much. So we'll just take the question from the gentleman here, and then we can pass the mic to our very able question and answer people, and then we'll just close that from there. Sorry, we're not closing out from there. The MD will ask a question as well. Go on, please.
Okay, yeah, my name is Shaya Basir. The question I have is for Ari and for the World Bank. How do you see the trajectory of the interconnected mini-grid sector, let's say? How is it going to go vis-a-vis, especially the DISCOs and the regulatory asset base and the state electricity markets? So how do you think that's going to go, let's say, in the next 10 years?
Thank you for keeping it very short and simple. The MD, please.
My name is Abba, also a participant. This question goes to Ash, Ashish, and HPMU without bothering my brother. So, is there a possibility where there's an innovative way to structure a transaction that will have a combination of both MST and PBG? So take, for example, I was asked this question yesterday, and I promised to ask you so that I will go back and answer the person. So a situation whereby a developer has a particular community, and that community has, for example, a tower and a projective use communication tower, right? And from the perspective of the developer, if he goes for PBG, right, he will not crystallize the costs of providing that particular tower. From his own analysis, that particular tower can raise some peculiarities, more especially as the REA is saying that they want to promote more productive use of equipment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, MD. Who wants to go first? Ash, Ashish, HPMU?
I can start maybe with the question on PUE. I think there's no expectation that the onus is entirely on the developer. I mean, we had a couple of sessions yesterday specifically on PUE where we discussed some of these issues. And, you know, there is an ongoing program sponsored by AFDB that initially focused on having the mini-grid developer be really the primary agent, right, for introducing PUE and the beneficiary of the grant funds. And eventually that was expanded to include third parties, PUE companies. And I think we all recognize that, you know, people have their core competencies. I think you may want to focus on your energy business. So this is really an encouragement for partnership rather than...
More of a grant money on you that's already making that much. What's MD? Wants to go to other people?
For the framework to be developed, I think we're all working on 9 parallel analytical studies. A lot of this feeds into that, and that's the reason where, you know, it takes a bit of time to combine and compare between mini grids, meshed grids, solar home systems. Give us till end of June. We'll publish it and have discussions around it. On your question in the front row here, there's good money from my side if anybody answers that question that you asked. You know, the roadmap in 10 years and how it will evolve with the states and state level regulations. I don't know. Honest answer. There's a lot of good interest from discourse. I think that's a positive sign. But how it will evolve, I've bet and lost a lot of money in Nigeria purely when I speculated. So we can talk about it. The combined MST and PVG, I think, thanks for an open brainstorming session while we're on the stage. Listen, I think we've discussed the idea of a consumption-based grant, we're not against it. In many ways, for productive use, it makes more sense. The idea is when you have a consumption-based grant, the burden of responsibility then also shifts post-project closing period to REA. And this is where the project funds could not be used in such an arrangement. But if there is a way to structure where this burden can be shared between the World Bank and any other agency, there is no harm in looking at a consumption-based grant. The dollar per connection is not the most.
Collaboration with FCDO, where they provided £10 million that will be funded in Naira equivalent to blend the cost of financing. So what this facility does is that it helps to reduce the all-in interest rate, but specifically for unserved, unserved communities where the energy access is missing. In more vibrant areas, there's a way that you can have cost-reflective pricing if it's in the urban areas. But we've been able to use that facility to provide blended support for a couple of developers that you're aware of. I don't know how much more capital we can get there, but we're talking to a couple of other partners to scale it up so we can actually be able to help address some of these macro headwinds whilst we continue to unlock financing in local currency. In connection with the PU, I just want to add something. I think I do agree with your point around burden of the developer, but at the same time, it's working in collaboration, because the ultimate issue is that you have to replace the equipment, and it can't be paid up front. It has to be paid over time. So we need to look at a model that allows for that while working alongside the developers in their community. So it reduces the burden, but at the same time does not take away the responsibility of developers to identify where there are productive use opportunities in those communities where they're deploying their capacity.
Okay, so for me, it's just to add to what you said about the interconnected mini-grids relationship with states and discos, and I think that's still an evolving conversation. So from where we were a few years ago, I think the NEP and policies have been able to break that jinx, essentially, of how the discos view this entire space. Before they were, a lot more standoffish, but now you're sitting beside a big man there who has over 600 sites that he's, assessing, right? And those sites were given to us by the discos. But looking how that relationship goes further, I was discussing with the ED ref that the day we're able to actually consummate on one transaction, then we know we're really in business. But I think with the states also involved, that would also help to keep them on their toes to ensure that we get across the finish line. Thank you.
Let me also add to that discussion on interconnected mini-grids. Like Arsh mentioned, I think none of us have a crystal ball, but certainly I think there are indications that this is potentially a very promising market, right? I mean, from the 2016 mini-grid regulations, there were already provisions for interconnected mini-grids, but there was no uptake initially. Over time, and NEP didn't provide any explicit support for interconnected mini-grids, but over time, I mean, we've realized that there's already organically some sort of collaboration developing between distribution companies and mini-grid developers. And it's really ready for a much larger scale up at this point. Now, some things are working in favor of that, right? I mean, there are regulations on, renewable requirements, distributed resource requirements that are pushing discos towards finding some solutions, right, to meet those requirements. They're not able to raise capital, so maybe mini-grid developers, other entities are able to do it better. So there are these forces kind of nudging the industry in that direction, right? And then now we have DARES providing incentives for mini-grid developers. So I think it creates this win-win situation where, especially if the focus is on lower performing areas, right? Band C and below, which is the intended focus of the interconnected mini-grid program under DARES. So there, discos can decide that, for areas where I am not able to provide the level of service the customers require, and nor do I have the capability to raise the funding to make those investments, I may be better off collaborating with third parties for a finite duration. And this is the value proposition, right? So I think we have good reason to believe that this market will grow. But again, none of us have a crystal ball into all the other forces at work. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Please, can we have a very big round of applause for our panelists? Mr. Alex had a question, but I feel like that question can be transferred to the next session, which is starting at 2:15, because you're also a stakeholder in that particular session. So the next session will be starting at 2:15, is at Australia Meeting Room. So we'll be happy to have all of you who are interested in DARES as well in that room. So thank you so much, HPMU. Thank you, Mr. Ashish. Thank you, Mr. Ash. Thank you, Mr. Azubike. And we hope that you can answer our questions again at the next session. Thank you, MD, and have a good afternoon, everyone.
I don't know here that